Asterisk. In the brutal world of underground fighting, there was one name that struck fear into the hearts of challengers: Jake, the Hammer Dalton. Undefeated, unstoppable, and utterly consumed by his own arrogance. Night after night, he crushed his opponents, not just with his fists, but with his merciless words, tearing them down before he ever threw a punch. Asterisk. Asterisk. But on this fateful night, after yet another brutal knockout, Jake's ego would push him too far. Because in the shadows of that very arena stood a woman who didn't flinch at his taunts. A woman whose calm demeanor hid a storm of skill and fury. Asterisk. Asterisk. Most people knew better than to challenge Jake Dalton. But she wasn't most people. Asterisk. Jake, mocking asterisk. What's wrong, sweetheart? Never seen a real fighter before. Asterisk. Asterisk. Jake mistook her silence for fear. A fatal error. Asterisk. Asterisk. He jumps out of the ring, swaggering toward her, his entourage laughing behind him. The crowd quiets, sensing tension. Asterisk. Jake, sneering asterisk. Bet you couldn't last 2 seconds in there with me. Asterisk. Asterisk. She sets her drink down, finally speaking, her voice smooth but edged with steel. Asterisk. Woman, calmly asterisk. You talk a lot for someone who's never faced real competition. Asterisk. Asterisk. The crowd gasps. Jake's smirk falters. Asterisk. Asterisk. For the first time in his career, Jake Dalton had been challenged not just in skill, but in pride. And pride was a dangerous thing to wound. Asterisk. Asterisk. Jake's face darkens. The air crackles with tension. Asterisk. Jake, growling asterisk. You think you could do better? Asterisk. Asterisk. She steps forward, the crowd parting like a wave. Asterisk. Woman, smirking asterisk. I know I could, but you wouldn't last a round. Asterisk. Asterisk. The crowd erupts. No one had ever dared speak to Jake like that. No one had ever been brave or foolish enough. Asterisk. Asterisk. And just like that, the gauntlet had been thrown. The challenge made. Tomorrow night, the world would see if Jake Dalton was truly the king of the underground, or if his reign was about to end in humiliation. Asterisk. Asterisk. Because in this world, there's always someone better. And Jake Dalton was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Asterisk. The underground fight arena buzzed with restless energy long after the last bout had ended. Spectators lingered, their voices a low hum of excitement and speculation. The air smelled of sweat, leather, and the faint metallic tang of blood. At the center of it all stood Jake, the Hammer Dalton, his chest still heaving from his latest victory, his ego swelling with every admiring glance thrown his way. Jake was a man who thrived on dominance. He didn't just defeat his opponents, he broke them, humiliated them, made sure they never forgot who was superior. His reputation was built on fear, and he wielded it like a weapon. But tonight, something had shifted. A crack had formed in his carefully crafted image of invincibility. It started with her. She had been watching him from the bar, her dark eyes sharp, her expression unreadable. While the crowd roared and clapped, she simply sipped her drink, her gaze never leaving him. There was no awe in her stare, no fear, just quiet assessment. And that unsettled Jake more than any challenger ever had. Fueled by the adrenaline of his win and the frustration of her indifference, Jake snatched the microphone from the announcer and turned toward her. What's wrong, sweetheart? His voice dripped with mocking amusement. Never seen a real fighter before? The crowd laughed, but she didn't react. She just set her glass down slowly, her fingers lingering on the rim, before finally meeting his eyes. You talk a lot for someone who's never faced real competition, she said. The laughter died instantly. A hush fell over the room. Jake's smirk faltered.
No one spoke to him like that.
No one dared. He stepped out of the ring, his boots thudding against the wooden floor as he stalked toward her. His entourage followed, their grins fading into nervous glances. The woman didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just waited, her posture relaxed but ready, like a coiled spring. You think you could do better? Jake challenged, his voice dropping into something darker. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. Then, with a small, knowing smile, she replied, I know I could, but you wouldn't last a round. The crowd erupted. Whispers turned into shouts. Some laughed in disbelief. Others leaned forward, sensing the shift in the air. Jake's face twisted in anger. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who looked at him like he was nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. You want to fight? Jake snarled.
Fine.
Tomorrow night. But don't cry when I put you in the hospital. She didn't blink, looking forward to it. And just like that, the match was set. As Jake stormed off, the crowd's murmurs grew louder.
Who was she?
Why was she so confident? And most importantly, was Jake Dalton about to meet his match? The underground fight scene thrived on spectacle, on drama, on the unexpected. And for the first time in years, something truly unpredictable was about to unfold. The woman turned back to her drink, her expression calm, her mind already calculating. She had no interest in trash talk or theatrics. She was here for one reason only: to prove that Jake Dalton wasn't nearly as untouchable as he believed. And tomorrow night, the world would see it too. The underground arena pulsed with an electricity it hadn't felt in years. By early evening, every seat was filled, every standing space occupied. Bodies pressed together in the dim lighting, the air thick with anticipation and the sharp scent of alcohol and leather. Word had spread like wildfire through the city's underbelly. An unknown woman had challenged the great Jake, the Hammer Dalton, and she'd done it with such casual confidence that no one dared miss what might happen next. At the back of the venue, in a cramped locker room that smelled of old sweat and disinfectant, the woman wrapped her hands methodically. The tape pulled tight across her knuckles, each loop a promise of what was to come. She didn't flinch when the door burst open and the promoter, a sweaty man with a cigar permanently wedged between his teeth, barged in. You still want to do this? He asked, his beady eyes scanning her frame. Last chance to back out. Dalton's in rare form tonight. She didn't look up from her hands. I didn't come here to back out. The promoter shook his head, muttering about insurance liabilities as he left. The sounds of the growing crowd filtered through the thin walls, their excitement building like a gathering storm. Somewhere in that noise was Jake, no doubt soaking up the adoration, feeding off the energy of people who believed him invincible. Meanwhile, in the champion's dressing room, Jake paced like a caged animal. His usual pre-fight swagger was tinged with something unfamiliar irritation. His trainer, a grizzled veteran of the underground circuit, watched him carefully. You're overthinking this, the trainer grunted. She's nobody. 1 round, maybe 2 if you want to play with her. Jake flexed his hands, the leather of his gloves creaking. I don't like how she looked at me. The trainer barked a laugh. Since when do you care how they look at you? Knock her out and be done with it. But Jake couldn't shake the memory of her eyes, calm, assessing, completely unafraid. No one looked at him like that. No one dared. The arena lights dimmed suddenly, and the crowd's roar reached a fever pitch. It was time. The woman emerged first, moving through the crowd that parted reluctantly before her. There were no cheers, only murmurs and curious stares. She climbed into the ring with effortless grace, her muscles moving with quiet power beneath her tank top. The ropes barely shook as she stepped through them. Then came Jake's entrance, pyrotechnics, pounding music, the crowd screaming his name as he strutted down the aisle, slapping hands and soaking in their adoration. He paused at the ring steps to glare up at her, but she wasn't watching. She was stretching, her focus inward, already in the fight. The referee called them to center ring. Jake loomed over her, trying to use his size to intimidate, but she simply looked up and met his gaze evenly. Remember, Jake growled low enough that only she could hear. You asked for this. She said nothing. The referee finished his instructions and sent them back to their corners. The bell rang. What happened next would be talked about in underground circles for years to come. Jake came out swinging, his usual aggressive style meant to overwhelm opponents immediately. But where others had faltered, she moved, not away, but at angles, her footwork precise, her head just out of reach of his wild hooks. The crowd's cheers turned to murmurs of confusion as Jake's punches found only air. Then she struck. A single counter, right hand snapped Jake's head back. The crowd gasped as one. Jake blinked, more surprised than hurt, and came forward again. This time she weaved under his punch and landed a brutal body shot that made him grunt. Round 1 ended with Jake returning to his corner confused, his chest heaving. His trainer was yelling, but the words didn't register. Across the ring, the woman sat perfectly composed, her breathing steady as her coach whispered in her ear. The bell for round 2 sounded. Jake charged like a bull, determined to end this embarrassment. She sidestepped, pivoted, and as Jake turned, she unleashed a spinning back kick that connected with his jaw with a crack that echoed through the suddenly silent arena. Jake Dalton hit the canvas like a felled tree. The referee began the count, but everyone knew it was over. The great Jake the Hammer Dalton, the undefeated champion, lay motionless on the mat. When the count reached 10, the crowd erupted, not in cheers for Jake, but in stunned disbelief at what they'd just witnessed. The woman didn't celebrate. She simply nodded to the referee and turned to leave the ring. As she stepped through the ropes, she glanced back at Jake, who was just beginning to stir. Their eyes met, and in that moment he understood. She hadn't come to prove she could beat him. She'd come to prove he was never as good as he thought. And with that, she disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a legend in ruins and a room full of people who would never forget what they'd seen. The arena lights burned bright over the stunned crowd as medical personnel rushed to attend the fallen champion. Jake the Hammer Dalton lay sprawled across the canvas, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths as consciousness slowly returned. His eyes fluttered open to see the concerned faces of his trainers hovering above him, their mouths moving but their words drowned out by the ringing in his ears. Across the emptying arena, whispers spread like wildfire through the departing spectators. No one could quite believe what they had witnessed. The once mighty Dalton, the man who had dominated the underground circuit for years, had been dismantled in 2 rounds by an unknown fighter. And not just defeated, humiliated. The footage would spread across fight forums by morning, the knockout replayed endlessly, each viewing another nail in the coffin of Dalton's reputation. In the locker room, the woman sat quietly removing her hand wraps. The sounds of chaos from the arena barely reached her. A promoter burst in, his face flushed with excitement. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" he panted. "That was Jake Dalton. You just changed everything." She continued unwrapping her hands, the tape peeling away to reveal bruised but unbroken knuckles. "No," she said finally. "He did this to himself." Outside the venue, reporters and camera crews scrambled for position, desperate to catch a glimpse of the mystery fighter who had shocked the combat sports world. But by the time they pushed through the crowd, she was already gone, vanished into the night like a ghost. Meanwhile, in the medical room, Jake sat slumped on an examination table, an ice pack pressed to his swollen jaw. His reflection in the mirror showed a man he barely recognized, his left eye already darkening, his lips split, his expression hollow. The doctor's words about possible concussion symptoms barely registered. All he could hear was the sound of his own breath, the pounding of his heart, and the echo of that final kick connecting with his chin. His phone buzzed incessantly, managers, sponsors, fellow fighters all demanding to know what happened. He ignored them. The only message that caught his attention was from his longtime trainer. "We need to talk." 3 words that carried the weight of a career in freefall. Across town, in a modest apartment, the woman stood under a steaming shower, letting the hot water wash away the sweat and adrenaline of the fight. Her phone sat silent on the bathroom counter. She knew the calls would come tomorrow, the offers, the interviews, the sudden interest from promoters who had ignored her before. But for tonight, there was only the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, and the knowledge that somewhere in the city, a man who had built his reputation on arrogance was finally learning what it meant to be humbled. The underground fight world would never be the same after tonight. A new legend had been born, and an old one had been exposed. And as the first light of dawn crept over the city's skyline, one truth became undeniable: the era of Jake the Hammer Dalton was over. 6 months later, the fight world still buzzed about that night. Jake, the Hammer, Dalton never stepped into the ring again. The defeat had shattered more than just his jaw, it broke the illusion of his invincibility. Sponsors quietly pulled their deals. Promoters stopped returning his calls. The same crowds that once chanted his name now whispered behind his back, some with pity, others with long overdue satisfaction. He drifted into obscurity, occasionally spotted in the back of local gyms, training half-heartedly, but the fire was gone. The man who had built his name on arrogance now carried himself with the quiet weight of a lesson learned too late. Meanwhile, she never took another fight either. Promoters threw money at her, begged for rematches, offered main event slots in bigger circuits. But she had only ever wanted one thing: to prove that the king wasn't untouchable. And once she had, she walked away without looking back. Rumors swirled that she was training fighters in an undisclosed gym, that she had gone overseas, that she had never been a professional at all, just a ghost who appeared to deliver justice before vanishing again. The underground scene changed after that. New fighters rose, but none with the same swaggering cruelty Dalton had wielded. The era of loudmouth bravado dimmed, replaced by something quieter, more dangerous fighters who let their fists speak instead of their mouths. And somewhere, in the shadows of a gem or the corner of a dimly lit bar, maybe she still watches. Maybe she smiles when she sees a new generation step into the ring with respect instead of arrogance. Because in the end, that was all she had ever wanted. Not fame, not money, just to remind the world that no one is unbeatable. The underground fight arena was electric that night. Not just with the usual bloodthirsty energy of combat sports, but with something deeper: anticipation, the kind that thickened the air, made breaths come quicker, made the crowd lean forward in their seats like predators sensing a kill. Because tonight wasn't just another fight. Tonight was an execution. Jake, the Hammer, Dalton had spent the last 6 weeks since the challenge fuming, training like a man possessed. His social media was a barrage of clips, heavy bag sessions that sounded like gunshots, sparring partners crumpling under his hooks, his trademark sneer promising pain. The message was clear: this woman had made a mistake. And the world believed him. Because Jake Dalton didn't lose. Jake Dalton broke people. Across town, in a small, no-name gym tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, she trained in silence. No cameras. No hype. Just the rhythmic thud of her fists against leather, the whisper of her footwork on worn mats. Her coach, a grizzled ex-fighter with a face like crumpled leather, watched with narrowed eyes. "You sure about this?" he grunted. She didn't pause. "I've never been more sure of anything." He exhaled through his nose. "Dalton's not just strong. He's mean. He'll try to hurt you." Finally, she stopped, turning to face him. Sweat glistened on her dark skin, her muscles coiled like springs. Let him try. The arena was packed beyond capacity. Security struggled to hold back the flood of spectators shoving their way inside. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted over the din. The energy wasn't just excitement, it was hunger. The crowd didn't just want to fight. They wanted a slaughter. Jake made his entrance like a conquering king. Pyrotechnics exploded as he strode down the aisle, draped in a custom robe with the hammer stitched in jagged letters across the back. The crowd roared, their chants shaking the rafters. He smirked, soaking it in, before turning to the tunnel where she would emerge. His smile sharpened. "This ends tonight." Then silence. No music. No fanfare. Just her. She walked out alone, dressed in simple black shorts and a fitted tank top, her hands already wrapped and taped. No entourage. No theatrics. Just a quiet, terrifying certainty in her stride. The crowd murmured. No one had ever faced Jake Dalton without fear. Until now. The bell rang. Jake exploded forward, his right fist already loaded like a shotgun shell.
Boom.
The crowd gasped as his punch whiffed through empty air. She had moved. Not back, asterisk sideways. Asterisk her head tilted just enough to let his knuckles graze nothing but wind. Before he could reset, her counter cracked against his ribs.
Thud.
Jake grunted, more surprised than hurt.
He swung again. Missed.
Another counter.
Missed.
Another.
Missed.
The pattern repeated, Jake swinging with murderous intent, her slipping every shot like she could see the future. And every time he overcommit,
whap, whap, whap.
Sharp, precise strikes snapping his head back. By the end of the first round, Jake's face was already marked a split lip, a reddening cheekbone.
His chest heaved.
Across the ring, she sat perfectly composed, her breathing steady. The crowd was deathly silent. Jake came out snarling in round 2. No more games. No more feeling out. He charged like a bull, swinging wild hooks meant to decapitate. She weaved under the first, ducked the second.
Then,
crack. A spinning back kick detonated against Jake's jaw. The sound echoed through the arena like a gunshot. For a single, suspended moment, Jake Dalton hovered, eyes wide, mouth slack before his legs betrayed him. Thud. The champion hit the canvas. The referee's count was a formality. Jake didn't move. 10. The bell clanged. It was over. The crowd didn't cheer. They stared. Jake Dalton, the man who had spent years calling himself untouchable, lay motionless on the mat, his face a ruined mess. And she didn't celebrate. She simply turned and walked away, vanishing into the shadows before the cameras could even process what had happened. Because this wasn't about glory. This was about truth. And the truth was now undeniable. No one is invincible.